The blaring horn of a luxury car echoed in front of Westbridge AutoTech, drawing the gaze of every mechanic bent over the chassis of a vehicle. A black Bentley pulled up, its door opened, and Victor Harrington stepped out, his tailored gray suit hugging his tall frame, shiny Italian shoes reflecting the workshop lights. His eyes were sharp as blades, sweeping the room, and the atmosphere instantly grew heavy. Derek Carter, a large man in an oil-stained uniform, froze when he saw his daughter, Imani Carter, crouched beside a 2019 Ford Mustang GT engine, holding a wrench bigger than her wrist. "Derek, what the hell is this?" Victor's voice rang out like a military command, cold and sharp. "A child in the workshop during my official inspection? You think this is a playground?" All the mechanics stopped working. The clang of metal ceased. Imani looked up, sweat beading her forehead, but her gaze was calm. Derek hurried over, speaking awkwardly. "Sorry, Mr. Harrington. She just stopped by after school to help me." "Imani, go home. Today's not the time." Victor raised a hand, cutting him off. "Wait. Let her stay." His smile was anything but friendly. It carried the air of a man who had just thought of a cruel amusement. Victor slowly walked toward the corner of the workshop, where a Porsche 911 Turbo S had sat under a cover for 3 days. He stopped, glanced around, then spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This car is a special case. My best mechanics from other branches couldn't fix it. Won't start, can't even diagnose the fault. So, why don't we give this little expert a chance?" Derek stiffened. "You can't be serious. She's only 12. Victor folded his arms, a smirk curling at his lips. "Exactly. A child, who I hear, spends all her time in here. Surely she knows as much as you guys, right? If she finds the problem, I'll keep this place open. If not—" He paused, a threatening glint in his eyes. "Then you know the outcome." A thick silence settled over the space, broken only by the clock ticking on the wall. Imani felt that familiar prejudiced look, the same one she'd seen in classrooms and supermarkets. But this time, instead of avoiding it, she stood up, locking eyes with Victor. "I accept." Victor's smile widened, but a spark of determination flared in Imani's eyes. The game had just begun. The air in Westbridge AutoTech felt stripped of oxygen. The mechanics stood in a semicircle around the Porsche 911 Turbo S, still under its cover. Every gaze was a mixture of worry, doubt, and a trace of pity for the 12-year-old who had just dared to face Victor Harrington. Victor strolled, each click of his Italian shoes on the concrete like a countdown. He stopped in front of Imani, leaning close enough for her to catch the scent of expensive cologne mixed with a faint trace of tobacco. "Little girl," Victor said, voice like a knife's edge, "do you know who you're up against? Do you realize that this shop will close if you fail? And your father will lose everything?" Imani didn't answer. She was used to such questions that didn't have an answer. They carried only one message: "You're not good enough." For a moment, she recalled the stare of a supermarket guard who had shadowed her just because she carried a worn backpack. The suspicious look from a teacher when she solved a math problem the whole class got wrong. The neighbors' whispers about that black girl hanging around the garage all day. Victor turned to the mechanics, voice mocking. "Relax, gentlemen. If this child prodigy finds the problem, I'll keep the shop open and give the whole team a bonus. But if not, this will be your last day here." Tony Vega shook his head, whispering to Derek, "This isn't fair, she's just a kid." Derek gritted his teeth, speaking low. "If I stop her now, he'll shut us down immediately. We have no choice." Imani heard it all. No expression crossed her face, but inside, a familiar fire began to burn, the same fire she felt whenever someone thought she was too small to do something big. She turned to Victor, her voice steady and clear. "So where do I start?" Victor smirked, walked over to the Porsche, and yanked the cover off. The silver metal gleamed blindingly under the lights. "Start here, engineer," he said, as if announcing a circus act to an audience. And the whole workshop held its breath, waiting to see whether the 12-year-old would crumble or change the game. Imani strolled toward the Porsche 911 Turbo S, her sneakers making soft clicks on the cold concrete. The entire workshop stayed silent, as if everyone was holding their breath to see what she would do. Victor stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes judging her like a magistrate awaiting a verdict. "Show us what you think you know," he said, stressing the word think like a slap to her pride. She didn't answer. She just touched the hood, feeling the faint warmth left from the last inspection. Her eyes quickly scanned the wires, the exposed metal under the lights. It was just a mess of cables and steel to most people here. To Imani, it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. Tony Vega, the veteran mechanic of 30 years, stood beside Derek, whispering, "She's not fumbling around. She follows the sequence. Ignition, fuel, electrical. Just like a pro would." Derek stood still, his hands clenched white. He knew his daughter had talent, but he had never seen her under this kind of pressure, where the shop's future and many families' livelihoods rested on a 12-year-old's shoulders. Imani looked up, eyes resolute. "I'll start by checking each system, and I'll need everyone to stay quiet for a few minutes." Victor let out a mocking chuckle. "Oh, the floor manager now, huh? Fine, princess. Let's see how long you last." Imani blocked out the taunts. She crouched down, wrench in hand, and looped the first bolts. In her mind, every step was already mapped out, like a chess game where the checkmate was already in sight. No one at Westbridge AutoTech knew she had been preparing for this moment. For 6 months. The neon lights above reflected off the sleek contours of the Porsche 911 Turbo S engine. Imani leaned close, her dark eyes glinting with absolute focus. She started with the ignition system, removing the protective casing, tracing each high-voltage wire, and listening for faint contact clicks. Everything was perfect. Next, she moved to the fuel system, checking pump pressure, fuel lines, and safety valves. Still nothing unusual. Victor stood with arms crossed, voice dripping with sarcasm. "How much longer, princess? I'm starting to yawn." Imani didn't look at him. She moved on to the electrical system, the part most mechanics left for last because of its complexity. Her small fingers slid along the bundled wires, stopping at a black control module connected to the car's central computer. She tapped it lightly, then looked up and asked calmly, "Have you checked whether it's sending the correct signal code to the central system?" The air in the shop froze. All eyes turned to Derek and Victor. Derek frowned. Tony Vega's eyes widened as he shook his head. "No, we never thought of that." Victor cut in immediately, voice tight. "Of course, we checked. Everything's been checked." Imani nodded slightly. "That makes sense. Because I read in my dad's technical manuals that this type of module can lock down the whole system if—" She stopped mid-sentence, as if realizing she'd said too much. Tony frowned. "Where did you read that?" Imani glanced at her father. Derek looked puzzled. She took a breath and told the truth. "In Dad's office manuals. When he wasn't looking, I borrowed them to read. If something was too hard, I used my phone to translate. Sometimes I found tutorial videos on YouTube." A murmur spread among the mechanics. Victor burst out laughing, his voice booming through the shop. Well, we have a YouTube-certified engineer here, fixing a 6-figure sports car with online videos? This should be good." But Tony didn't laugh. His eyes lingered on Imani longer, as if realizing she knew something they had all missed. And that was the moment the story was about to take a turn. Victor never saw coming. Imani didn't react to Victor's mocking laughter. Instead, she placed her hand on the control module, fingers tracing its edges, as if feeling for an invisible pulse. "I know this sounds crazy," she said, her tone lower and steadier than usual. "But this module isn't like the older systems. If it doesn't receive the correct electronic signature from its components, the ignition is completely disabled. It's a new generation anti-theft mechanism." Her words made a few mechanics frown. Jake, the youngest, blurted out, "Electronic signature? Like a password?" Imani nodded. "Each component has its unique ID code. If the central computer suspects a part has been replaced without authorization, it locks everything down. The problem is, very few people in the industry have been trained to spot this. The documentation only came out a few months ago." Tony Vega inhaled sharply. He'd never seen this in any training manual for 30 years in the trade. Victor cut in, voice growling. "Enough. If you're so smart, prove it. Start this damn car. Or admit you're just a cocky kid who read a few pages online." Imani met his gaze without blinking. "I can do it. But I'll need a laptop with internet access to download the reset software for the electronic signature." Derek turned to his daughter, astonished. "You know how to do that?" It's not hard, Dad. You have to know where to look, she said quietly but firmly. Victor scoffed, arms crossed. I'm not letting a kid mess with a car's electronics worth more than this shop. The air grew taut. Until Tony stepped forward, locking eyes with Victor. Let the girl try, Mr. Harrington. If she fails, you would scrap this car anyway. But if she succeeds, his gaze sharpened. You get a working Porsche for free. Victor narrowed his eyes, weighing his options, then slightly nodded. Imani took a deep breath. The moment she had been waiting 6 months for had finally arrived. No one in the shop knew. She had known the answer since the day the Porsche first rolled in. Victor reluctantly signaled for Jake to bring a laptop. Imani took it, placed it on a side table next to the Porsche, and pulled an OBD2 diagnostic cable from her backpack. The mechanics exchanged surprised glances. No one expected a kid to carry one like a pro mechanic. She plugged the cable into the diagnostic port and connected it to the laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, and the rapid clacking echoed in the silent workshop. Lines of code scrolled across the screen like flowing water. Tony Vega frowned. This wasn't random clicking, but direct access commands to the car's core system. Without looking up, Imani spoke. 6 months ago, I started researching why many new Porsche models had the same fault. I realized their control modules were programmed to fail after a set period. Victor laughed, but his smile was strained. Nonsense. You think you've uncovered some global conspiracy? Imani remained calm. No. She pressed a key, and the screen displayed serial numbers for 18 Porsches, all with the same fault, all failing exactly 90 days after their first start. Whispers rippled through the shop. Tony stepped closer, eyes wide. God, this is real data. Imani continued. These cars are repurchased cheaply, fixed with a single line of code removed, and resold as refurbished, making hundreds of % profit. Victor clenched his fists. You're accusing a billion-dollar brand. Watch your words, kid. Imani smiled thinly. I'm accusing one more person. You. She hit another key. A series of emails appeared on the screen, bearing Victor's digital signature correspondence with company executives about intentionally leaving the module unfixed and taking a 15% commission on every car deemed unsalvageable. The shop fell silent. Derek stood frozen behind his daughter. Tony turned to Victor, eyes filled with both anger and disgust. You knew how to fix it all along, but made us pretend we were helpless? Victor stepped back half a pace. For the first time since entering the shop, his confidence cracked. The air in the workshop was thick with exhaust fumes. Every eye was locked on the laptop screen, where emails, contracts, and wire transfer records appeared line by line, as if telling their own story of guilt. Imani moved the cursor, her voice clear and unwavering. This is your letter to the manufacturer dated the 12th of March. Quote, keep staff focused on basic diagnostics. Do not mention the possibility of reprogramming the module. After 48 hours, declare the car irreparable. An outraged murmur rose from the mechanics. Jake, the youngest, took half a step forward, eyes burning red. You made us look like a bunch of incompetents, when the truth is you wanted us to fail? Imani switched to another tab. On the screen was a list of 47 cars and 15% commission payments deposited into Victor's account over $1.2 million in just 8 months. Derek, still standing behind his daughter, stared at the figures, his voice choked. Victor, you knew from the start. Victor tried to counter, his voice rising. She's a hacker. All of this is illegal. Can't be used as evidence. Imani remained calm, her lips curling into a blade-thin smile. Maybe you don't believe me, but thousands of others will. She tapped a key combination. The screen instantly switched to a Facebook Live interface. In the corner, the viewer count read 1,273 and climbing fast. The entire conversation from when Victor walked into the shop until now was being streamed live. A flood of comments poured in. I paid $4,000 for repairs. Now I know I was scammed. FBI needs to get involved right now. Harrington's a con artist. Tony sighed, shaking his head. You're finished, Victor. Victor looked around. The faces that had once feared him now radiated collective fury. Imani's gaze pinned him in place. And then, from somewhere outside, The wail of police sirens grew louder. The sirens echoed down the street, drawing nearer. Red and blue lights flashed across the workshop walls through the windows, flickering like the pounding heartbeat of someone about to lose everything. Victor spun toward Imani, growling. Everything you've got won't hold up in court. You're a kid, admitting you hacked a system. You think they'll believe you over me? Imani didn't blink, stepping forward, voice steady and cold. Not think. No, because everyone here, and over 1,000 people watching this live stream, just heard you admit it. Victor froze, looking around. The employees who once worked under him now stood united behind Imani. Their eyes held no fear, only collective outrage. Tony Vega stepped forward slowly, standing beside Imani. I've worked in this trade for 30 years, and I've never seen someone so dirty that they'd turn their crew into a joke just to line their pockets. You don't belong here anymore, Victor. Victor tried to cling to some shred of authority. Have you all forgotten who signs your paychecks? Jake shot back instantly, voice sharp. Not you anymore. And soon you'll pay more than our salaries. To your lawyer. Imani lifted her chin, eyes glowing with the calm of someone who had calculated every step long ago. Do you know why I wasn't afraid today? Because when you looked at me, you decided I was too small to be a threat. That's what made you lazy about hiding things. And now, it's too late. The sirens stopped right outside the shop. A voice boomed through a loudspeaker. Mr. Victor Harrington, we have a search warrant and an order to take you into custody. Victor glanced around one last time. The hands that had once shaken his in respect were now clenched, not in greeting, but to send him out of this place, for good. Victor Harrington was escorted out of Westbridge AutoTech under the strobing police lights. Before getting into the car, he looked back, his gaze stripped of arrogance, left only with raw fear and bitter defeat. The live stream was still running, with viewers soaring past 5,000 and climbing. Comments poured in like a flood. He refused to fix my car, too. Hope he rots in prison. This girl's a genius. Derek wrapped his arm tightly around his daughter's shoulders, both proud and in disbelief at what had just unfolded. Tony and Jake stepped forward, faces alight. Imani, you just saved the whole shop. And not only that, you saved our honor. 3 months later, the glass facade of Tesla's Palo Alto headquarters reflected the deep blue California sky. In a simple business dress, Imani stood in a conference room filled with big names: Google's chief engineer, Microsoft's AI director, and Jennifer Walsh, Tesla's vice president. Jennifer smiled as the entire room stood to applaud. Imani, your real-time fraud detection system could change the auto industry. Tesla wants to sign a $2 million consulting contract, starting immediately. The whole room waited for her answer. Imani smiled, her voice gentle but firm. I accept, but on one condition. All eyes turned to her. Part of the project must be done in Detroit, at my father's shop, with the entire Westbridge AutoTech team. They deserve to be part of this story. Jennifer paused for a moment, then nodded. Deal. At the same time, in a rundown rented apartment on the outskirts, Victor sat hunched over piles of legal documents. After the scandal, he lost all 47 shops, was sentenced to 18 months house arrest, and was fined $500,000. His wife had left, his friends had turned their backs. He switched on the television as the news covered the 2-year-old girl who toppled an auto repair mogul and saw Imani's radiant face on the screen. Brought down by a child, he muttered, his voice fading into the room's emptiness. The new sign gleamed above the entrance. Carter and Daughter AutoTech. The old Westbridge shop had been transformed into a training center for Detroit youths in automotive technology. Any kid could learn to diagnose, program, and repair modern cars in this place. Inside, Imani, now 13, stood before reporters, presenting her developed electronic diagnostic system. Derek watched quietly from the back, his eyes full of pride. Tony and Jake, now heads of the training department, guided new trainees, most of whom were young people from underprivileged communities. When the filming paused, Imani stepped outside, where a group of students were waiting to hear her speak. A shy 4-year-old boy raised his hand. Imani, how did you dare face someone as powerful as Mr. Harrington? What if you had failed? She smiled, her eyes distant as she recalled that moment in the shop. He was stronger than I in money and power, but he made a fatal mistake. He confused power with intelligence, and he confused skin color and age with incompetence. When someone underestimates you because of prejudice, they've just given you the biggest advantage, the element of surprise. A girl at the back asked, "But what if you couldn't find a way to prove it?" Imani tilted her head, her smile widening. "I had been researching that problem for months before I was challenged. I stepped into that match already holding the answer. Failure was never in the plan." The group fell silent, then erupted into applause. Imani's final words rang out clearly. The best revenge isn't dragging down the one who humiliated you. It's rising so high that they become irrelevant. 2 years later, Imani became an engineering student at MIT through a special program for young talents, still running her consulting firm remotely. The clean code system she founded had been deployed to over 2,000 shops across the U.S., preventing countless similar fraud schemes. And Victor Harrington? After serving his house arrest, he applied to several small garages. But his name was always rejected. The last time anyone saw him, he asked for work at a roadside garage only to be turned away by an owner who had watched the live stream that day. Imani never spoke his name again. To her, the story had long been closed. She hadn't just fixed an engine, she had fixed a broken system, opening opportunities for hundreds of young people like her. Above all, she has proven that you should never judge a person's potential by appearance.